Hi, everybody. Welcome to NewsNite for Friday, September 23rd, a dreary start to fall. Great to have you along. The big question this week is why? Why did it take 6 weeks to clear the men who stopped the mass shooting in Copley? Why are hundreds of local jobs on the line with the U.S. Postal Service? And why not send Akron's fire truck back if New York City's done with it? We know why you're here. Good conversation, and that's next on NewsNite. Hope you're having a great Friday evening. A lot to get to, so let's get right to it. Great to have along Phil Trexler this week from the Akron Beacon-Journal. Great to welcome a familiar face to many of you, Bob Dyer, also from the Akron Beacon-Journal. And as always, great to have along with us freelance contributor and journalist Jody Miller. Okay, I think the thing that many of us knew was coming was that this officer and the former officer would be cleared in Copley. Did any of you think it would take 6 weeks, though?
Well, it's not uncommon for these things to take a long time. Talking to Chief Mike Meyer out in Copley, the file on this investigation is voluminous. You're talking about 7 deaths and the officer shooting, and there was no rush either. You want to be thorough, you want to be accurate. And the fact is that 99.9% of the folks already knew that this was a justifiable use of deadly force. So it's not surprising that it took a long time. The results were not surprising. What I thought was refreshing was the series of interviews that Campbell gave during the day with every media outlet, one at a time, and it was just refreshing to see him have such a positive outlook on such a negative situation.
Well, in a lot of cases, Phil's absolutely right. These kinds of shootings historically take a long time to come to a conclusion. I mean, investigators, officers want to make sure that, in fact, all the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed, they've talked to everybody. And you can't just talk to somebody in the heat of the moment or right after it happens. You've got to let it settle a little bit. You've got to let things decompress. And I think that's exactly what happened in this particular case. I think, again, I agree with what Phil said. It was really refreshing to see Officer Campbell. Because this, regardless of the rightness or the wrongness in what he did and what the other former officer did, they took a life. And that has to resonate very hard with anybody. So they were doing their jobs, but they took a life.
I thought it was interesting. I was talking to Campbell about the feeling, do you feel remorse? Do you feel sadness for what happened? And he really didn't. There's a lot of times that officers who shoot a suspect, even though it was an unnecessary use of deadly force, there's generally some sort of remorse or some, feelings of sorrow there. And while he felt bad about taking a life, he knew that it was the right thing to do and the necessary thing to do. And who knows how many lives he saved as a result of his bravery. And
as the details continue to come out, Bob, has the community of Copley, has the shock worn off?
It still seems surreal. I think everybody remembers where they were. It's just like so many other major episodes when they heard the news. I mean, that kind of thing just doesn't happen in Copley. Mm-hmm. The big news in Copley is if a school levy fails or something. It's just unheard of or something like that in any community, but much less Copley.
Well, and what was interesting to me is to listen to some of the things that Officer Campbell had to say. At times we forget that there are a lot of mundane things that you do as a police officer, obviously, But here's this man who was sitting, having coffee, got a call, the kind of bravery that it takes to get out of your car and not know what kind of man you're facing, what kind of confrontation you might in fact become part of. I mean, my heart goes out to him and to all officers who go through this, because it's like what we talk about with firemen. 1 minute you're sleeping, the next minute you get a call and you got to jump up. And that kind of ability to all of a sudden do your job and do it the best that you can is extraordinary. I
thought it was kind of neat too. I'm sorry, but that he admitted that he was scared.
Yeah, walking down that street.
I mean, that's admirable for a burly, tough cop to admit. I was scared walking down that street, knowing that there's a guy who already killed 5-6 people, and he's looking possibly at his own death here. And I thought it was admirable that he talked about that. Yeah, he admitted he's human.
Right.
Yeah, and I thought that was neat.
Well, that's why they make the big bucks, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So how important is it for him to get back now to work?
I think it's extraordinarily important for him to get back to work. Like he said, he's a cop. That's what he does. And I think in the report I saw on WKYC, he was asked, and he said that his wife would like him maybe to look for a little safer line of work. But, you know, that's what he does. And I think it is important that he get back out there, just to get back into the swing of things, because an incident like this probably will never happen again. I mean, how many police officers do all of us know who have never pulled their guns, let alone had to shoot anybody?
The vast majority never even pull their guns in their whole career.
Right. And that was actually the first time that he did have to use deadly force in the course of his duties. He's shot deer before, obviously, but never before it he had to shoot a person. So that was certainly a traumatic experience.
Did he mention whether Michael Hance had fired at him?
No, there was no fire. He did say that he felt that as he was walking down Shockalog Road that Hance came out, and Hance was obviously surprised to see the officer there, and Campbell gave his warnings, and Hance apparently raised his gun and trying to flee, and that's when Campbell and Lavery, the off-duty retired former officer, opened fire, and they each shot 3 times, and it was Campbell's 2 shots that felled the Michael Hance. So no, there was no exchange of gunfire there, but it was an obvious, you got a man with a gun there who's already killed a lot of people raising his own gun. There's no question that the use of deadly force was appropriate in this case, and that's what the prosecutor found.
What is it saying about our community, though, that all local departments have to train for this active shooter scenario now?
Yeah, it is. I mean, as Jody pointed out, you don't have this type of incident in Copley, and you'll never have it again, most likely.
On a Sunday morning.
On a Sunday morning, people are driving to church.
Yeah.
He's there, patrolling the circle and sipping a Starbucks, and lo and behold, here this call comes out, and it's kind of neat to hear him tell the story, the progression of how it goes from a shots fired, which you hear on their police scanner all the time, to you got a person down in a driveway, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And talking to Officer Campbell, he even talks about how surreal it even seems now that this actually happened to him, to the community. And I thought he expressed a lot of sympathy toward the victims and their families, and you can tell that he really struggles, I think, still with the fact of the teenagers, and of course Scotty Dieter, who was the last victim of Michael Hance, 11 years old, and he was,
Go ahead, Jody.
But it's also, Eric, this is what a police officer trains for. Inherent with their job is the responsibility to go to that gun range every year for, I don't know whether it's 40 hours or 80 hours, that they have got to continue to work with their weapon and all of the weapons that they use. And that's part of keeping sharp and keeping ready for a situation just like this.
And it's very difficult. You got to remember this: walking down that street, this is a married man with a wife at home, 2 children. I mean, he's just like us. I mean, we got families, and he's a family man, and he's walking down the street with this mad gunman on the loose. I mean, just a terrible situation to put a person in, and you think about, you complain about the pay that these guys get, but you can see where they're underpaid in these types of situations.
And it's a whole lot different shooting at a target than it is shooting at a real person. And that's the kind of things that these people train for.
Keeping the adrenaline under control, I would think, would be tough. I mean, 2 of the 3 shots hit him. I mean, if you're shooting at a target, you're not fired up.
Right.
Well, bad choice of words, but you're not. Your system's not all geared up, and the blood's pounding through your temples. Right. So the guy was remarkable to land 2 shots from 60 feet.
Yeah, and it was classy too that he specifically went out of his way to mention the 2 officers that he trains with at Copley, crediting them with the training that he said his fear went away and his training took over, and luckily he did, because who knows if he would have missed those shots, Hance would have been on the prowl, and more people could have been endangered.
Including the officers.
Often one of the unsung heroes in any case like this are the dispatchers, the ones that are taking the calls, trying to process that information to get officers where they were supposed to be at the time. And as I understand, the dispatchers here were taking calls from a woman who had kids in a house with the gunman in the house, as well as the one member of the family who had gotten away. I don't think we can say enough about the training that they have to be able to do that job.
And we hear it all the time on the scanner and in 911 calls, some of the work that the dispatchers do. These are civilians. They're not out on the streets, but yet they're hearing these horrific calls and these tales of woe, and they have to remain calm. And frankly, the officers' lives are in the dispatcher's hand.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And the only time usually they get on television is when they mess something up. I mean, they second guess to death if they don't do it exactly right.
Well, I want to talk about the money that's spent on this training as we shift the conversation now to NewsNite.net.
For more NewsNite content, including extended discussions, full interviews, and the chance to speak your mind about the issues, join us online at NewsNite.net.
New economic figures from the census show that families in Summit County alone could be as many as 30% of them living at or below the poverty line. It's rising quickly at the same time that jobs are on the line, guys, from the U.S. Postal Service. Most people don't care where their mail comes from as long as it gets to their house, but these are hundreds of local jobs.
There's 400 jobs at risk here in Akron at the Akron Processing Center, and I think it's 200 jobs at the Canton Processing Center. And it's the kind of job loss that everybody kind of feels totally helpless against. You know, the post office is at a point where they have been losing money hand over fist for years. Mail volume is down. They've got to do something, and they're going to have a deficit of next year of either $9 or $10 billion. So they've got to do something. This is an agency that it operates like a government agency, but it's not a government agency. It's a private agency, and yet they're obligated to do what, in fact, like the government says. So they can't increase their prices unless it's based on inflation, unless they get a break from Congress. And so what we're looking at is how they can, in fact, save money. And one of the ways is to consolidate those processing centers. And it looks as though the Akron and the Canton Processing Center, they may go away.
There's processing centers all across the country that are facing the same. The post office employs over 500,000 people. It's the second largest private sector employer in the nation. 80% of their revenue goes toward their employees' benefits and pay. This is a system that's become outdated. It's a victim of the internet. People are paying their bills online. People are sending emails, and it's got to adjust to this new way of life. And it's been slow to react. And the fear down the line is that a possible government bailout of the post office, with the deficit the way that it is, changes need to be made, and it's the attention that this is getting is very little. I think this is a huge problem that this country's facing, is the Postal Service.
Well, Phil created it a couple of years ago. I'm sitting at my desk and he starts talking about banking online, and I'd always done the checks. I had Quicken, so I thought I was like state of the art, and I'd print it out and mail it. And he said, "Why are you doing that? Just go online and pay it." I tried it. It was a piece of cake. I'd love it. And there are a whole lot of people like me in this country, and that's where their problems are. It's not because they did something wrong. It's like so many other industries where the world changed.
And I have neighbors who deliver mail, and thank you for outing me. But it's true. We rely less and less on the mail.
But the post office also is constrained by what they can do to, in fact, change how they operate to make themselves better. I mean, you've got a FedEx and you've got a UPS, which are just taking a lot of the business away from them, but those are private companies that have the ability to adapt and adjust quickly. The post office does not.
And they don't have the same employee costs as the post office does.
Exactly.
And they have to pre-fund all the retirement, which is
and they got a bill due of $5.5 billion that they have to pay the Treasury, and it's unclear whether they can pull that off.
Well, and it's like Bob said, it's pre-funding. I mean, it's not like it really has to be paid or it goes away. It's just this is part of the rules and regulations that Congress has set up for the Postal Service. So, I mean, we're looking at not only losing jobs here locally, but we're looking at no Saturday mail. We are looking at the possibility of, I live in Bath, and we've got a wonderful Bath post office. Well, Richfield has a Bath post office, or a post office. And I mean, there's a possibility of closing those smaller post offices. Not that those two have been targeted. But, I mean, if you've got to save money, you've got to save money. You can just as easily go to Acme down the street and buy stamps and get all the services that you do at a small local post office
but aren't
branch.
These employees who thought they had a job for life?
Oh, yeah.
A lot of other businesses.
And some of them are going to find out. I mean, I guess they've trimmed about 100,000 workers in the last several years, but the post office has to become more nimble, and they're very slow to react to this. And this is a huge problem, and I just think it's not a sexy topic, but I mean, the thought of a government bailout for the post office is very real.
Well, but it doesn't have to be a government bailout. What it has to be is Congress acknowledging that there's a problem and giving them the freedom to be more nimble, as Phil said, which, you know, given the state of Congress right now, they can't even fund disaster relief, so they're not going to fund the post office, I don't think. But it's something that has to be done now because they're up between a rock and a hard place.
We need a second Christmas card season so that there's a lot of mail generated. But all kidding aside, what does this do to the Akron-Canton community when, as the Beacon reports today, 30% of the families now in Summit County, mostly in Akron, are at or below the poverty level, to see another 400 possibly out of work?
It's a disaster. Yeah, but what do you do? I mean,
where are these people going, though, Bob? Are they moving out of town? Where are they finding the jobs?
But they aren't. They're unemployed. You know, they're sitting, they're going, okay, the story also talked about the increase, like almost a 50% increase of people going to the food banks. You know, the new poor who have no idea the services that are out there or that are available to them. The families that are literally, you know, there's 2 and 3 families now living in a home because that's the only way they can make expenses meet. So, I mean, and this is going to add to it. So I don't know where the end is, but thank God for food banks because at least these people are able to eat to some degree.
Sure, and a lot of us are skeptical of the people we see on the corners with signs saying it. But
for
Bob,
good reason.
But Bob, don't you think that there's more legitimacy to some of them now?
Oh, absolutely, but how do you tell? I mean, I would rather write a check through the mail or otherwise to one of the charities where I know the money's going to go to good cause. I mean, these people, some of these people work in shifts. I know of people who've approached them offering painting jobs or small menial jobs for, and they say, well, not really, I'm doing better here. So a lot of these people are, it's a job for them.
Are you seeing them in Montrose too?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I've seen the shifts change. You know, some guy packs up and goes, and the other person comes in with a different sign, sits in the same spot.
And I know that they're actually in the background. There's a lot of talk going on in Montrose between Bath Township and Fairlawn, and perhaps Copley talking about how to address this situation because they're not happy. There's a lot of people complaining about the panhandlers in Montrose. You're used to seeing them in downtown Akron, but not
you can't restrict them. The courts
No.
have ruled over and over that it's a freedom of speech issue. Akron has the most restrictive panhandling ordinance they could possibly come up with because they surveyed the rest of the country to see what passed.
But Medina tweaked theirs prohibiting people from soliciting near a street light, a stoplight, and But this is a big issue. There's some concerns out there in Montrose that this is not good for business and doesn't reflect well, and there's some questions about the veracity of these claims these men are carrying on their signs.
Yeah, I would.
It's the same guys every day.
I'd bet a fortune 90% of them it's just a job. I mean, they're not homeless.
Exactly. Right.
Does that make it more difficult then on someone who is a first-time homeless who really just needs a shot in the arm?
Absolutely. But there are places they can go other than sitting on the sidewalk.
But there are places they can go, but they sometimes don't realize it. They don't know it. They've never had to be in a situation before where they had to ask for help or understand what social services might be available. So that's difficult for them because they don't even know where to start
Jody,
sometimes.
how difficult is it for a middle-class family that's always been able to pay their bills to suddenly be in a position in, let's say, 6 months' time where they're living in a basement and they have to go to the Haven Arrest for food?
Oh my! It's got to be devastating. Absolutely devastating. And I don't know what the answer is. But that's what we're talking about in terms of the new poor. People who have always had a job, who have always been able to pay their bills, and all of a sudden, maybe one or both family members are out of work, and they've got kids who are going hungry. I mean, that's the situation that we're faced with right now.
And these are the tough times, the economic times we'll continue to talk about right here on NewsNite.
On NewsNite.net, we cover a broader range of topics than we can on the air in 27 minutes. Be part of the conversation on our Facebook page and at NewsNite.net.
A few weeks ago, as we looked at the 10th anniversary of 9/11, we talked about the truck that the people of Akron had put their money toward to help the people of New York. Bob, you were part of that back then. You've made the case now that maybe that truck could come back here. Tell us about it.
Well, first of all, it's still amazing. Excuse me. It's still amazing to me that Akron donated more money to New York City than any other city in America after 9/11. $1.4 million. Really? Most of which was small contributions, $10, $20 here. People sticking a buck or two in a firefighter's boot as they drove by in the corner. So that, to me, that's the thing that just is overwhelming about the whole deal. I went out to see how the fire truck's doing 10 years later, and it has had a remarkable record. It makes 12, 15 runs a day. It's bruised and battered, but it's still serving well and literally saving lives.
It's in that neighborhood fire station in Queens?
Yeah, it's a Woodside neighborhood in Queens. It's about a 15-minute subway ride from Manhattan, so it's a little off the beaten path. But interestingly enough, within the first 4 years, a lot of people who vacation in Manhattan would make a special trip over to see the fire truck and talk to the firefighters, and they apprecited that. Are
the firefighters aware of where it came from?
Oh yeah, very much so. They called it Akron East for a long time, really. I mean, 8 of them came back the year after and visited Akron to give thanks that the people were so generous. In New York City, they have a union rule that every 11 years they have to replace the fire trucks. So it has one more year on the front line, December of next year. After that, they generally keep them as spares. These trucks break down from time to time, so the Akron's truck has been in the shop from time to time, so they bring another one in. So for about 3 years, they'll use it for that and for training exercises. So we're talking 4 years of more service in New York. The first time I heard the idea of maybe we should return it to Akron was interviewing one of the firefighters there who was on the maiden voyage and is still there and loves the truck, and said he thought it would be a very appropriate thing for New York to give it back at the end of its useful life. We're not sure exactly where that stands. The fire department officials are a little iffy when I contacted them, mostly because I think it's 4 years away. But it sounds like if we'd have to pay anything to get it back, it would be a nominal amount. But the idea would be bring it back to Akron, set up some sort of 9/11 memorial here to not only remember what happened, but to reinforce the idea that Akron's a pretty cool place. I mean, when you get little people given $1.4 million for people they don't know living 400 miles away, that's pretty cool.
Good idea to bring it back?
It'd be a great idea to bring it back, absolutely. And I love the idea of incorporating it into some kind of a 9/11 memorial, because it would be, as Bob said, just a way to not only recognize and symbolize that eventful day, but to also recognize the generosity of a community that came together to do something. Okay, we did something. We gave them something that they could use, and I think that is indicative to me of the Akron community.
One point of clarification, Bob. You said the people of Akron donated over $1 million. The truck didn't cost $1 million, right?
That truck, the big famous truck, the 95-foot ladder truck, cost $950,000. Wow. So we were also able to buy them 2 ambulances and 3 police cars. So they got pretty good bang from the city of Akron.
When will we know if they're going to agree to send it back to us? We're going to have to wait till then?
4 years probably, yeah. You never really know if it falls apart suddenly. I mean, it's got 10 years of tough wear and tear. The streets of New York are not pretty. Sure. And they're banging into stuff. You know, they've got about this much clearance when they come roaring out of this little narrow garage in Queens. So we don't know how it's going to hold up, but ballpark estimates 4 years down the road, and I'm fairly sure something could be worked out.
We'll be talking about it here, that's for sure.
Are you going to be around to spearhead this? Okay. All right.
That's something I've done.
No. Just want to make sure. There's too many of my friends who are retiring at this point in life, and it's like, okay, be around to do this, guys.
Yes,
I hope I'm there. That's 4 years from now. We've got 4 minutes left. I want to mention one other story that made the rounds this week, a story that I was able to start. The OMG, which stands for Oh My God, most people think, in the acronym that was on a billboard put up by Children's Hospital in Montrose. Children's has agreed not to use it in any future advertising, Phil, because one local mom blogger said she found it offensive.
Yeah, and then 100,000 other people said, I used to be,
Why the face, right?
Exactly. Why the face over this? You broke the story, God bless you, but, with all that's going on in the world, here we are talking about a billboard in Montrose that says OMG, which OMG could be oh my God, or it could be oh my goodness, or oh my gosh. But
Children's Hospital agreed not to use it anymore.
Children's caved. I guess they're not going to use any ads in the Beacon. Sorry about that. And because one woman.
This is the worst cave job since my wife caved in about 20 years ago. I used to go out, listen to this story. I used to go out and be part of the television tour out in Los Angeles every year. They bring in the stars and the producers and directors and talk TV and all the.
Because you covered TV.
I covered TV, so we went out there and talked. While I was out there one year, I interviewed Bart Simpson, who was actually a she, and had a great interview, and we went out to lunch and sat for an hour. At the end, I said, boy, would it be cool to have Bart Simpson on our answering machine. So I had her do a little thing. This is, here's the number, and this is Bart Simpson. Who the hell are you? And I put it on the machine. I thought that's the coolest thing in the world. One of the neighbors complained to my wife, my kids could call up and hear hell. So my wife said, take it off. And
Too much political correctness, Jody.
It really is. You know, I love the fact that people can get passionate about things. But in the same week that we have this story, we have the poverty levels rising. We have a story. I was at a meeting at Children's Hospital on Tuesday morning, and Wednesday morning. There is such an incidence now of increased violence against children, increased shaken baby syndrome because of the economy and the way we're going through.
So why do so many people get upset about three little
letters?
That
I don't know. Why can't people get more passionate about the fact that children are being abused? That's what I just don't quite understand.
The key is it wasn't a lot of people. It was one woman, so they caved in. I mean, come on. You don't cave. You know, if we changed their policies because of one complaint, we wouldn't do anything. We wouldn't put a paper up.
It wouldn't roll?
No.
But there was an awful lot of, it resonated with a lot of people, because how many people were on your Facebook when you broke that story?
There were a few that did stand up and say they did find it offensive, and there were others that just said, offensive or not, they wouldn't call a complaint about it.
What percentage found it offensive on your Facebook?
Oh, less than 5. Less than 5.
But look who's a big winner. Children's, even though they cave, they're still a big winner, because now everybody knows about the billboard.
Does it point out our business in the fact that the story was picked up by MSNBC and major newspapers across the country as a chuckle and the kind of thing that we knew would get a rise out of people?
Well, you know what? There is so much bad news anymore. This is the kind of thing that maybe it is lighter, and maybe it is the kind of thing that you can chuckle about, you know, and maybe that's why it gets picked up. But again, it goes back to how can one woman's complaint raise this much fuss?
My favorite headline was billboard blasphemy that I saw down in Texas. We got 30 seconds, Jody. Real quick, tell us about next week.
Next week, Friday night, September 30th, 10 p.m., we have a program going on at PBS called Guns and Pubs. It talks about concealed carry and the changes in the concealed carry laws in the state of Ohio, which will allow, if it's not posted, a concealed carry permit holder to carry a weapon into an establishment that serves alcohol. So it's next Friday night. We talk to the sheriffs of a couple counties. We talk to gun advocates. We talk to people who are against gun violence. It's a pretty comprehensive look at where we are with concealed carry in Ohio.
And we'll look for that next week. Jody, Bob, Phil, thanks for being with us. As you as well. We'll see you next Friday right here for Newsnight. Good night.